If you spent any time at the London Book Fair this year, you will have noticed a pattern. Walk past any panel with AI in the title and you'll find a room full of nervous energy. Publishers wringing their hands, authors muttering about theft, and a general sense that the robots are coming for the written word. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of that conversation completely misses the point. Not because the concerns are baseless, they're not, but because parts of the publishing industry, an industry that has too often underserved the authors who create its value, has suddenly discovered outrage about rights, ownership, and fair compensation, and pointed almost all of it at the wrong target. If you're an established business owner, consultant, or thought leader using a book as a strategic asset, one to build authority, open doors, and create high-value opportunities, this conversation matters to you. Not because AI is coming for your book, but because the real issue underneath all the noise is one you should have been thinking about long before AI ever entered the picture. And that's who actually owns your work and what can be done with it. In this video, the first in a 4-part series on AI and author rights, we're going to talk about the underlying fears, the sudden copyright panic, and whether AI is really out to steal your book. Let's start with the fear in the room. Walk the halls of any major publishing event right now and you'll hear the same note on repeat. AI is going to replace authors and editors and agents. Pick your role, somebody is worried about it. This fear isn't irrational on its face. Generative tools genuinely can draft prose, summarize manuscripts, and produce passable cover copy within seconds. For people whose livelihoods depend on doing those things manually, that is a legitimate disruption for you to sit with. But notice what the fear is actually about. It's about displacement, not about rights. It's a fear that the work itself becomes less valuable, not a fear that someone else's work is being misused. For an author using a book as a strategic business asset rather than a primary income source, this particular fear barely applies. Your book isn't a product that you're selling at scale in competition with AI-generated content. It's a credibility asset, a conversation starter, and a door opener. The AI will replace authors' fear is real for parts of the industry, but it's largely irrelevant to the question you should actually be asking, which is what happens to your existing IP, not whether AI can write a worse version of it. This is why so much of the energy in the room, however understandable, ends up being directed at the wrong question. So let's unpack the copyright panic. Headlines about AI companies being sued, settled with, or investigated for how they trained their models have made AI and stolen content feel like synonyms in a lot of people's minds. Every new lawsuit, every fresh expose about a dataset reinforces the same narrative. AI equals theft. The trouble with this framing is that it treats AI as this single monolithic thing, as though every AI company, every model, and every use case carries the same legal and ethical weight. They don't. There's a meaningful difference between a company training a model on content it licensed or purchased and a company training on content it pulled from pirate sites. There's a meaningful difference between an author using an AI tool to organize their own notes and a platform scraping an author's published work without consent to build a competing product. When the conversation collapses all of this into one undifferentiated panic, AI bad, AI steals, it becomes very hard to have a useful discussion about what's actually happening, case by case, contract by contract. And for an author trying to make a sensible decision about their own IP, that collapsed, panic-driven framing isn't helpful. It's actively distracting from the specific questions that matter for your work. So let's address the AI is stealing our work elephant that's in the room. This is the emotional core of the conversation, a sense that something has been taken without permission, without payment, and without consent. It's an understandable reaction, and it's the one that gets the most airtime, the loudest applause from conference audiences, and the most shares on social media. It's also, in many of the cases that have been making headlines, not wrong. Authors whose books ended up in AI training datasets without their knowledge or consent have a legitimate grievance. And in some cases, as we'll come to, that grievance has been upheld by courts and resulted in significant settlements. But here's where this framing becomes a trap for authors trying to think strategically. AI is stealing our work implies that the theft began with AI. It positions AI companies as the original wrongdoer, and the conversation stops there, at outrage, rather than continuing on to the more useful question of how that content became available to be taken in the first place, and what that says about the state of author protections more broadly. If the only story is AI did this to us, there's nothing for an individual author to do except to be angry. If the fuller story is this is part of a much larger and longer pattern of unprotected IP, there's suddenly a great deal an individual author can do. Now, this has led to a reaction to the wrong thing. Now, those reactions are understandable. They are also, in large part, a reaction to a symptom rather than the underlying condition. Fear, panic, and accusations of theft all point at AI itself. But the technology isn't actually the source of the problem. It's just the thing that made an existing problem impossible to ignore. Think of it this way. If a house has a slow leak behind the walls for years, and one day a storm causes that wall to collapse, the storm isn't the cause of the damage. It's the thing that finally revealed it. You could spend your energy being furious at the storm, or you could recognize that the leak was always there and ask what you're going to do about the plumbing now that you can finally see it. So the real issues aren't AI in the abstract. They're ownership, their control, and licensing. Questions that have always mattered long before AI entered the room. Who holds the rights to a piece of work? Who has the practical ability to decide where that work gets used? And under what terms has it been licensed? And to whom? And for how long? These are the questions that determine an author's actual exposure. Not whether AI exists, but whether the foundations under an author's IP were ever solid to begin with. AI hasn't created these issues. It's just made them impossible to ignore. So where does this leave you? If you were building a business around your expertise, and your book is a core part of that strategy, the question isn't whether AI is good or bad. It's whether you understand what you own, what you have signed away, and what your IP is actually worth. This isn't about panic. It's about positioning. The authors who come out ahead won't be the ones who shouted about AI the loudest. They'll be the ones who understood early on exactly what they owned and exactly what that was worth. So join me next week where we start looking at AI as a tool and not a threat, and what actually matters to authors right now. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss out on this important conversation. But until then, happy publishing.